Hey guys, Noel here, and it is Monday morning, and I've got a cold and a day off of school because I didn't get called into work, which is good. It works for me. I just get to chill out for a little bit and nurse this cold. And I thought it would be fun to do a take two on a video we did a while ago on the YouTube channel, right around the time Villanova was marching through the Big East tournament to go win March Madness, which is good stuff. And even though this video, it got some views, I thought we could do a little bit better job on it, so I thought let's do a take two of it. And this is going to be my thoughts on the Atari Box / Atari VCS, as it's been rechristened, and the possibility of doing something along the lines of an Atari Jaguar Mini. Now, I realize that this is kind of a pie-in-the-sky hope, but it seems to me that the Atari Box or Atari VCS is not very focused, and I'm not quite sure actually who their audience is with this. Now, there is a lot of nostalgia, and there is some, I think, kind of hipster fascination with something like the Atari 2600. Certainly, video game shows like Classic Game Room speak highly of the Atari 2600. And the host of that show tends to go on about how he likes wood paneling, which has made the fine people at whatever Atari is right now really want to make sure that they heavily emphasize that the new Atari VCS is going to actually have wood paneling on it. But as video game YouTubers like RGT85 have pointed out, there's not a lot of specifics about the Atari Box or the Atari VCS other than the fact that it's kind of going to be a Steam box running with Linux, and it's going to have wood paneling, and there's not really any software for it, and the technical specifications have been listed, but they seem to be pretty broad. So there's not a lot of specifics when you start asking the people who actually are running Atari, what the system's going to be able to do. Apparently it's going to be something along the lines of a good laptop computer, have that kind of gaming power. So my solution to this would be to have something, I get the 80s nostalgia, so I'm not necessarily opposed to having more things like the Atari Flashback. I've heard the Atari Flashback Gold is really good. I don't have it. I've got an Atari Flashback 4, which is, we can do a review of that sometime. It's hit and miss. But, for me, one of the things that's lacking in my gaming collection right here is an Atari Jaguar. So, I've got things like 3DO, I've got things like Neo Geo, I've got things like Sega CDX and Sega Saturn, but I, never ended up with an Atari Jaguar. I almost bought an Atari Jaguar when I was in 7th grade, but my mom basically said, look, why do you want to buy something that's on its way out? Just, get a PlayStation here and be done with it. Why? Because my Sega Saturn was getting phased out of the American video game market because the people at Sega didn't know how to market this thing, even though it was marketed well in Japan and outsold the Nintendo 64 very well. Sega Saturn is one of my favorite video game consoles. But nevertheless, I would be really interested in getting something like a budget Atari Jaguar that really comes with a good sample of Atari Jaguar games. Now, I haven't played a whole ton of Atari Jaguar. When I would go to my friend's house, who is a game collector, he has an Atari Jaguar. I used to mess around on Kasumi Ninja and thought that game was kind of funny and was decent to play. And there's other games on Atari Jaguar that look really cool. Things like NBA Jam Tournament Edition look really good on the Atari Jaguar. Doom looks pretty cool on Atari Jaguar. So, there's definitely software on the Atari Jaguar that I think would sell. And it's something that people have heard of. And when Atari VCS, back when it was known as Atari Box, was starting to make noise on social media, they were throwing up, Jaguar hashtags and things like that. So, if you ask me, and again, I know this is a very niche type of thing, there's not going to be a lot of Atari Jaguar nostalgia like there is for just general 80s nostalgia because of shows like Stranger Things, which is a very good show that you should watch. But having something like a Jaguar Mini, I mean, that's focused, right? I mean, that's something that's like you're going to cater to a retro gaming collector audience, and you know what you're going to do. And what they should do is something like the At Games Sega Genesis HD. Now, I don't really understand why some people are upset that apparently the new Sega Mini hardware is going to be developed by At Games, because quite frankly, the Sega Genesis At Games HD Mini is pretty good. Mainly because they fixed the sound emulation quality, and the coolest thing it does is it actually plays your Sega Genesis cartridges. And my son and I, we play this maybe more than we play anything else. Why? Because we have the ability to play a bunch of really good games that are loaded on the system, and we can play Sega hardware on it. So I understand that the Atari Jaguar has a homebrew community out there that is still developing titles for the Atari Jaguar. Again, the Atari Jaguar is something that I'm curious about. It's something that I dabbled in really slightly when I was younger. So I'm just saying, like, there's an audience for this. There's a homebrew community for this. And I think there, at least for people like me, would be interested in this, as opposed to putting out like a $300 Linux box that already exists in other forms, and then just putting the Atari logo on it. Because to me, that does not sound that great, and it's drawing a lot of similarities to the Coleco Chameleon, which also has a Jaguar connection, because that was a Super Nintendo Mini stuffed inside a Jaguar shell. Or it was really, or at one point it was a video board stuffed inside a Jaguar shell. It was anything stuffed inside a Jaguar shell with Coleco Chameleon thrown on it. So if you actually did something like an Atari Jaguar Mini, I think that would give some kind of, a happier end to the Atari Jaguar, other than having it be associated with the Coleco Chameleon, which was a rip-off retro video game console. And what my understanding is that the Atari Jaguar, a lot of the shells were sold to dental offices and are now used as dental cleaning equipment. So it's kind of a sad fate for the Atari Jaguar. So if you ask me, doing something like an Atari Jaguar Mini would be something that would cater to retro gamers, something that the homebrew community is already engaged in. And if you could find a way to make it like the Sega Genesis HD Flashback, where you could have high-definition output, let it play Atari Jaguar cartridges, and come loaded with some games. And the other cool thing about the Sega Genesis HD Flashback is that comes loaded with Master System and Game Gear games, too. So you could throw on Atari 2600 games, Atari 5200 games on it, and have it still be good. So I understand. I mean, these are just my thoughts. And I think it's probable that Nintendo will come out with a Nintendo 64 Mini. So you could potentially have competing 64-bit minis. And at this point, it wouldn't be much of a competition. I think people would just be either buying the N64 Mini and buying the Jaguar Mini because they're just interested in buying minis. It wouldn't be like the old console wars where Sega and Nintendo were at each other's throats. So, that's it, guys. I mean, I've consumed various Atari products. I mean, for me, my retro gaming lies mostly with things like the original Nintendo up through the present. My first console was the Sega Genesis. But I mean, I do have some Atari cartridges. You have a Robotron and Pac-Man for an Atari 5200 that I don't own. I have Donkey Kong for my Atari XE, which does not work. And, when Atari was bought out by a series of companies and ended up with Infogrames, I definitely, was happy to buy Atari titles. Even though this one is a very, very awkward Dragon Ball game. This might be the weirdest Dragon Ball game ever, and I don't know if it's necessarily weird in a good way. But, I mean, there's definitely, I think, potential for this thing. There's interest in this thing, but it basically is coming from the Atari name, and I'd like to see something like a Jaguar Mini be attached to that. So there's my thoughts, guys. Until next time, My name's Noel. Keep watching the channel, and I will see you all sooner than later. Bye-bye.